Tom, as you said, I spent 10 years in full-time ministry, and about 2006 moved into the marketplace. Uh, Keith, we talk about what we are is a consumer organization. So we talk a lot about knowing your consumer. A favorite quote, simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple, but it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. And we firmly believe at the Nason Group that getting simple thinking is really difficult, but once you get there, it makes a world of difference. And even thinking about that in the church and how you relate to, and I'll use the term consumers here, so even those that attend your church as a consumer, and kind of where they're thinking and where they're going is pretty complex, so it's real difficult. So innovation is a lot more than technology. There's a lot of misconceptions even in the church that innovation is wrapped around technology, but it's a lot more than technology. It's a lot more than flash and things of that sort. But innovation is a mindset and how you think about it. And I'm going to show you here in a minute how we look at innovation in a model and framework we use called consumer-centered innovation. But most importantly is, can we really keep up in this ever-changing environment? And Mark and I from our team have had several conversations recently, and even with our pastor, discussing how do you stay on the forefront of knowing where consumers are going and where the world is going, so we can be relevant in the church and where the church is going. And I think that's a struggle that every pastor is facing today, even if their churches are thriving and doing well and growing. Is how do you still stay there? So here is a little model, and as I said, shared with Tom, we will be walking through this, and then we'll PDF this, and you guys will all get copies of this going forward. But we call it consumer-centered innovation. It's something we're coining, may trademark it. We're talking about that. And actually, you're the first group that we are publicly showing this graphic to. It's taken us a little while to get to this spot, but you'll see there in the middle is this whole concept of the consumer. And how do we get consumers into our church doors, whether it be on Sunday morning, Saturday night, during the midweek? And how do we get them involved in the community of the church? And foundationally, we talk about know me there at the bottom of the triangle. Then surprise me and make it easy. And these are some real principles I'm not ashamed to say that became part of me as I worked at the Walt Disney Company. As Tom mentioned, I spent 7 years there. My first job actually out of being in the church full time, and learned what it was like to truly build an experience for guests and for our consumers. So the foundation is all that. And then you see these three circles intertwined around leadership, mindset, and culture. And it's taken Steve and I a few years to be able to articulate it and really talk about where this happens, this consumer-centered innovation framework happens, and it's really in those three places. And you'll see around here, this is more for the marketplace, around methodologies, processes, and capabilities. But all stuff, what's interesting is I had another conversation earlier today when we talk about methodologies around UX and UI, which in the marketplace is user experience or user interface. And how does that relate to the church? How do we build a user experience or a user interface that is friendly? And that's not talking just technology, but seamless, that we can know the people when they walk in the door, we can surprise them in some way, and we can actually make it easy for them to build that relationship with Christ and to walk in that daily walk with him. So that's the framework. Definitely can talk more about that later, or if you want to afterwards, you can reach out to us. Totally open to it. So here are, Steve and I attend, if you ever want an interesting event to go to in your life, Steve and I attend the first week in January of every year, the Consumer Electronics Show, which is the biggest consumer trend show in the world. Takes place the first week in January every year in Las Vegas. It has grown in the past 7 years since I really attended. It has tripled in size, and they're expecting it to grow again this year. So basically every hotel on the Las Vegas Strip has some type of consumer product in it. There's a whole space for electronics, for healthcare, for emerging. But there's a report that comes out every year by Ericsson, and I actually have the link at the end of this if you ever want to go out and pull it, that we pull some of the trends from and then add a couple more as we do some global work. Fortunately, Steve and I get to travel globally and do some work as well. So we're going to talk through the 12 of these trends and then have a little bit of discussion afterwards. But if you have an overarching question that you really want to know as we're talking through this, please stop me and say, hey, what about this? And what's interesting is, as I was actually going through this and preparing this for today, I thought, how does this become relevant to the church? Some of these things, like aging or the Internet of Things or augmented reality. But then I started to think and take off my traditional thinking and think, wow, what if we did church differently? And what would that look like? So I'm going to walk through some of these, try to get through them all. I'll be cognizant of time to leave some time at the end for questions and answers, and hopefully it'll be done within the hour. So AI everywhere, otherwise known as artificial intelligence. It's not just robots, let me say that. But 35% of consumers, and there were somewhere around 18,000 people surveyed globally. So this isn't just in the United States, this is a global perspective. But 35% of people want artificial intelligence or AI advisor at work. So are looking to see how they can impact their work style and where their work goes, which is really interesting to us as we play in this innovation and consumer space. What's even more scary is that 1 in 4 would like an AI, artificial intelligence, as their manager. So Steve and I and Mark does leadership coaching, and Steve and I build a lot in this space. This would probably frighten some of Mark's clients right now if they knew that 25% of the people they worked for would prefer to have artificial intelligence as their manager versus a person. But with that thought process, think about how that gets translated and moved into the church. And then almost half are concerned that AI robots will soon make a lot of people lose. I keep going to change that, lost their jobs, but lose their jobs. We're seeing that every day. More and more people are losing jobs because of artificial intelligence. Post-purchase. This is a real interesting area for us particularly. Don't know how much you guys study out there, what's happening in the marketplace, but Amazon is disrupting again with their launch or their purchase of, Whole Foods, as well as launching, many people don't know this yet, but they're getting ready to launch an airline, and that'll be tested actually here in our Cincinnati market. But what does that mean? And what does that mean to post-purchase? So I don't know how recently some of you on here have taken a vacation, stayed at a hotel, purchased something, but consumers see that raw number of 4.6 out of 5 and take it more serious than merited. So what that means is, and I'll pick on Steve because Steve and I travel a ton. We get into a city and we talk about going to dinner, and the first thing Steve does when I say that question, I know exactly what he's going to go do. He's going to go get on Yelp, and he's going to go find the restaurants close to us. And then he's going to read the reviews. And from that, and see, Mark's even giving a thumbs up, so Mark must do the same thing. That's going to make a decision of where we're going to go eat dinner, especially if we're in a new city. Now that we travel to some cities more, we know where we want to go, but many of those restaurants has happened because of Steve's research on Yelp. Going on vacation, TripAdvisor, people use TripAdvisor, and that they take it more valid than maybe what they should. So imagine putting that into church perspective. What if a Yelp or a TripAdvisor was launched and called the Church Advisor, and people started posting reviews about church and what was taking place in the church? What would that look like to us? And 55% of shoppers find reviews important for making purchase decisions. I just bought a new car 2 months ago. And fortunately, because we travel a lot, I had driven several cars, knew exactly what I was looking for, had the criteria, had it narrowed down to 2 cars. And when the one car didn't offer one piece of the criteria that I wanted, it was the other car. And I actually called the dealership here in Cincinnati, had looked at all the reviews, said, "You've got this on your lot. This is what I want. Let's get all the paperwork done." And literally my car buying experience took my wife and I 45 minutes once we walked into the lot. But we had done all this research and reviews to that matter. And then consumer owns their role in the post-purchase experience, not us. And we have tried in the church, as I mentioned, I was full-time really for probably 18 till almost 28 or 29, so 10 years. And we always tried to think about what were people saying when they left the doors and how were they going to get their friends in. And that's becoming more and more real every day. I still mark and I sit in services, and I'll watch people, and I do it, Instagram videoing, taking pictures or posting during services, and that's all affecting. Yes, Steve's doing it now. So the consumer ultimately owns the role, and the consumer really owns the marketing of your church anymore, which is a shift. So like, how do we think about that and move that into our thought process as leaders, as pastors, as elders in the church? The Internet of Things, this has been around for a long time. Really talked about the past 5 to 7 years, but it's growing more and more relevant, this whole connected life. So consumers are increasingly using automated applications influence overall IoT adoption. So, my phone's sitting right here on my desk. I probably have 100 different applications on there that I use, from health and well-being stuff to everything to focus on my life, from finances to all, and even now, live streaming in church. People don't even have to get out of bed, can pull it up and watch church. So this whole Internet of Things concept. 2 in 5 believe that smartphones will learn their habits and perform activities on their behalf automatically. That's already starting to happen. And that's through artificial intelligence. AI is running stuff. It just continues to crack me up. I looked up something the other day for my wife, and now it's all over every feed on my phone, on both of my laptop, my desktop here. But I believe this is growing faster, this 2 in 5. And smartphones, we're on the 7th iteration of an iPhone. And they're becoming more and more relevant. And I'll show you here in a little bit, even a bed now that is out there that is smartphone enabled and Bluetooth enabled. And 1 in 2 believes that they will be able to talk to household appliances. Already happening. My LG refrigerator here in the kitchen is got Wi-Fi connection. and which is really interesting. I don't know what it provides for us, but the next step above the LG refrigerator I have actually is Bluetooth enabled. It actually has the ability to scan the ingredients within the refrigerator and create a grocery list and send it to your grocery store. So, you know, Internet of Things is here, and it's disrupting. Consumers in training. So here we are talking about consumer trends. What do you mean, Shawn, consumers in training? Here is a prime example. Don't know how many of you shop at Target. We're huge Target fans. There's one a mile and a half from here. And actually, they just released that they were totally revamping their whole design of their stores. So you're going to see huge changes. But this group of kids right here, 10 and under, were brought into the headquarters in Target, and they started to pick their brains and see what they liked, what they didn't like, fashion and stuff. And they launched this new brand of clothing called Cat and Jack, all consumer designed with designers with them, but all the kids' input. It's the highest growing product line in Target that they've ever had. They launched it and it just took over. So they're actually discontinuing some of their staple brands and really moving forward with this in the future. So think about that in our churches. We've got a lot of discussions around it with, how do you minister to kids? How do you keep kids engaged? We have a great program. We invest a lot in it, but it's a struggle for churches in the future here. And children with considerable or complete input on purchasing decisions on child-specific treats. So thinking about what's child-related, children-related. And here's just some statistics. 69% in the Asia Pacific, 77%, 82%. Here in North America, 67% of children have complete or input on their purchasing decisions. And I can say I have a 9-year-old and a 2-year-old, and that's absolutely the truth. So it's 100% in my home. They have no problem telling you what they like or don't like and how they want to move forward in purchasing stuff. And here is a great quote, and this is, we have Kroger's here in Cincinnati. This was at a Price Chopper supermarket that a friend of mine had a little plastic kid-sized shopping carts. We have them at our Kroger. My daughter loves them. And the first time they saw the little kid pushing one around, they were like, oh, this is really cute. Oh, my gosh. But then they saw on the side a sign that said customer in training. So here they were already getting children accustomed to come to their supermarket, meeting their needs. I remember when I was a kid, it was you just rode on the cart, the big buggy. That was the cool thing to do. Now they have their own buggies, or they're the cars that are in there. But thinking about this is probably one of the biggest ones I think that will impact the church going forward. Is how do we execute a plan, a vision to keep children engaged in the church through their lifetime. This is a big one, not totally as relevant to the church, but something that we have to be aware of. But this whole concept of the privacy divide, 2 in 5 surveyed in this only want to use encrypted services. So thinking about data and what data looks like and how it's used. Almost half would like to have just reasonably good privacy across all services. That's an interesting one to me. Reasonably good. What does reasonably good mean? And more than 1 out of 3 believes privacy no longer exists. I think what's interesting in this concept is we're not even aware or don't even think about privacy until you've either had a breach of your privacy or identity theft or something like that. But then before you know it, it's no longer top of mind, so we forget about it. Steve and I were fortunate enough last Friday, we were in Boston. We actually toured, which actually made me happy because they have my retirement funds. We toured the Fidelity Think Labs, and they were talking to us, and if I remember right, Steve, help me, it's something like 2 billion transactions per second come through their systems, which is mind-boggling to me. But what they're really known for is this whole security and privacy of their data. And many times they're the ones that are reaching out to vendors who use them to say they actually have a breach in their data, that their systems have detected it. And they actually showed us this cool picture. We weren't in there, but in Dallas, Texas is their command center. And there's actually, it looks just like what I would imagine a command center, TV screens everywhere where they're monitoring just this thing, privacy. They're watching the news. They have TV channels of every major news network looking what's going on around the world, which is interesting as we think about using technology in the church. What does that look like?
Well, and I think, Shawn, part of that too, there's a lot of different ways that people give, whether that's,
Yeah.
through the church. There's also, I'm facing it right now. I'm giving money to get my child to go to a festival out in California. And so we're doing that all via phone. And then I'm also on all of these lists that the church has too. And I think sometimes we don't think about the other person to say, gosh, I'm sending my information out here. The church is supposed to be a trusted entity, and it's one of those that I think we need to be increasingly aware of.
Yeah, but I would probably most churches don't have a technology person focusing on data and data issues. Great point, Mark. So aging, a changing narrative. I know none of us on this call are aging at all. But the growing population over 50 represents a fast-growing contingent of active, productive people who are working longer, but also taking the economy in new directions. So even AARP is having to fundamentally switch their model to think about how they move forward. Multiple careers and new education, living and financial planning strategies are needed to create a fulfilling longer life. So biggest thing, if you're over 50 on this call, which I know not many are. So this is the new aging. So you can go back now and tell people you have been diagnosed with middlerexia. And this is middle-aged and older consumers who act younger than their years, embarking on rigorous triathlons or keen to borrow their offspring's clothing. So I don't know about you, but I can sit in church and think of many people that have middlerexia, or be walking. My wife and I love to people watch. But this whole concept of we're living longer. We were actually in Boston where Steve and I were last Friday. There was this big conversation around, will at some point, and so this is a real controversial topic thinking about church, will at some point with technology and the way things are advancing so fast, can we actually control when we die? And it got into this real rich conversation around it. And people were like, I don't want to live longer. Like when it's my time to go, I want to go. But it is a reality that this whole, and you see these superhero, right now, my wife and I were trying to go to the movies the other night, and they're like, there was nothing but superhero movies practically playing at the movie theater. And so people are kind of looking at this going, wow, could we control our death? And again, huge controversy or great I would say, great topic discussion for churches. Like, how does that impact even our theology, how we were raised, what the Bible says, to what's happening in the marketplace? And how do we have that conversation with people?
Hey, Shawn, one
Yeah.
question, if I may. I had the opportunity to work in 7 different communities across the country, and with anywhere from 7,000 to 9,000 boomers retiring a day up until I think 2030. A lot of nonprofit organizations and churches were trying to figure out how to more engage this new generation of retirees. Their demands are significantly different. As Shawn said, they're living longer lives. They're much more active. Working with, I probably met with 300 or 400 nonprofits, and out of that, probably 20% were churches. It's how do we capture that energy, and change our model of how we have people volunteer, for example, for the church or engage with a nonprofit. I think that's a very big question, and so many people want to help, and it's about organizations changing their paradigm in terms of what that means, because you have such active folks aging and retiring.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. Great. And then the funny quote down there that I had read when we were discussing this agents and narrative is, those in the group of minorexia think they look amazing in their dungarees or their plates or their thigh boots. So again, how do we just amazingly, Steve, I love how you put it, how do we engage them in a new way? And people are trying to figure it out. Virtual reality, very different than artificial intelligence. So you have artificial intelligence, which many times is, robots or, running stuff in the back end. It's more technology driven in the back end. Virtual reality, though, over half of people would like to use virtual reality glasses to eliminate dark surroundings and highlight dangers. So thinking about it from a safety perspective, how people would use it. But then more than 1/3 would also like to edit out disturbing elements around them. So not only using virtual reality, but turning it into augmented reality, and not dealing with really what's happening in the world, but narrowing their scope. And around 2 in 5 want to change the way their surroundings look and even how they appear to them. So where I've always thought here in this virtual reality space, and I think it's going to grow this way, is imagine people using virtual reality to start attending church, to attend church. Like, there's this whole concept that I could put my glasses on and be in the building and feel like I'm right there with it. It's much more than live streaming. And it's happening everywhere. I mean, I don't remember, Steve, again, how many thousands, but I think it was like 150,000 square feet when we were at the Consumer Electronics Show this year was just focused on virtual reality. And it's booming. I took off some statistics. I probably should have left them on when I talk more to marketplace. But the billions of dollars that is getting invested in startups is something staggering, like $38 billion next year, or this year, will be funded just in virtual reality companies trying to disturb what's happening. And then we talk a lot in healthcare, but virtual reality can engage patients in low-risk, artificially generated sensory experiences. So this is already happening. Steve and I had the privilege last year to work with Dr. Oz, if you've ever watched his show on TV, and had some great interactions with him. But one of the things that Dr. Oz started to do, obviously known as a heart surgeon, what his primary thing is starting to use virtual reality to show heart disease of people's hearts. But what was even cooler is I remember when he launched the first video, he was actually standing in the middle of that patient's heart, inside the heart. And he was pointing and showing the patient where the heart disease was and what would happen. Then using augmented reality, if they didn't take care of themselves and start and providing well-being to their self, what would happen to their heart? And I thought, wow, what could we do in the church space with some of this cool virtual reality stuff, to show people, as we talk and lead them through the stories. Imagine using virtual reality to talk about biblical stories. It would be pretty awesome and amazing.
And Shawn, what if you could visit some biblical landmarks? What if you could go to, because a lot of us are unfortunately unable to go there, and you can see pictures certainly, but what if you're able to immerse yourself in the Holy Land, that kind of thing?
Yep. Awesome. Then personalize it. We've talked a lot about that here already, but experiential luxury, a shift in focus from purchasing luxury goods to enjoying services. Today I read, my wife and I are huge cruise fanatics. And there's a cruise line out of Italy that in January of 2019 is doing what they call the World Cruise, 6 continents, 36 countries in 119 days. And I was actually joking with her. I'm like, what if we pulled the kids out of school for a semester and did this with them? And what all could they experience? That was a great idea until I got online to check the price tag. And I think the cheapest one was $27,000 a person for the 120 days. But organizations are talking about this all over the place. So products that fit you. A great quote. This is from a gentleman in England. Bespoke this, bespoke that, enough already. Michael Quinion observes, there has been a distinct fashion for it. At this point, it's really over the top. So, can we even keep up with this personalization and how fast it's moving? Greater consumer digital engagement has facilitated the easier compilation of a growing body of information on customers, with brands discovering consumer taste and preferences. Again, talking some about that in artificial intelligence. Amazon, once you look at something once, it appears everywhere when you're on Amazon with them. So they know your interests, and then they start showing you what you should be reading or what you should be buying. And then these subscription services curated by you. We use sophisticated algorithms that continually learn based on your feedback, combining the same techniques as top dating and music recommendation sites to find other bars we know you'll love. As a app out there called Cocoa Runners. So they take all these algorithms, everything you access on your phone, and start recommending things to you as well. Again, putting that back into place in church. It's really hard to keep people's attention. I know Mark and I've had discussions and with our pastor and together, what is the right length? What's the right service time? How long can you keep people's attention for and still be effective in communicating what you want to do? How do you personalize it? How do you meet all the needs of everybody in the body? So this is a real realization for us in the church. Social silos. This is actually interesting to me because I think people thought technology would do away with silos, but it's actually, I think, created more silos. So today people are willingly turn their social networks into silos. What does that mean? That 1 in 3 says social networks are their main source of news. I think we just lived through a prime example of this in the last election. Who would have thought social silos or social media could have really driven election the way that it did this last time, and still does today? More than 1 in 4 values their contacts' opinions more than politicians' viewpoints. The reality of it is, and this is not a political discussion, but the one thing that President Trump has done is he's brought the presidency almost to a point to full transparency. I get his notifications off of his Twitter feed, and I probably get 20 to 25 a day where he's tweeting out or someone's tweeting for him. But always know what's happening with our president now, which is completely different than it had been in the past. And these social silos, you know, how do we deal with that as we look at the church and where the church is moving in the future?
You know, Shawn, with that one, I heard a great quote a few years ago that we're the most connected and disconnected society, and I think that's so true. And so, you know, what does that mean for the church? Certainly, what does that mean for families within the church and connecting, and whether that's small groups or what have you?
Yeah.
Good quote.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And then social media organizations, a potentially rich source of data to efficiently track consumers' experiences and in real time, much more efficiently than current approaches. And the reality of it is Facebook isn't a social media company. Facebook is a data analytics company that has more data than most other organizations in the world. Amazon, I say this, Stephen, I've had a lot of conversation on this. Amazon uses products as a mechanism to their business, but their business is data. Like, they have so much data. And because we do so much work in the healthcare space, we try to find area and ways to partner with them to bring that data in, because it could really impact the healthcare system moving forward. And then again, we're just talking about, you know, Amazon faster shopping, rapid convenience. There's this concept out there called push doctor that you can have ultimately can see a doctor in less than 6 minutes. I don't know the last time you were able to think you needed to go to the doctor and be able to see a doctor in 6 minutes. We just launched, I was just part of an organization here that launched a new model, even in this space, changing the way you see your primary care physicians. Food rush, grocery run. So grocer that offers restaurant quality meals on the go, as well as in-store dining and bars. This is happening everywhere. Even now, I have friends that can't go to Target without getting their Starbucks before they go in to shop. And then the grocery stores changing their whole aspect of how we get food. And then fashion, you know, this whole concept of see now, shop now. And then you can buy on Instagram. So my wife actually is part of this new fad out there called LuLaRoe. It's a new brand of clothing, but the only place you can buy that clothing is online, and you have to be invited into a private group to buy that clothing. And they do these pop-up stores. I only know this because tonight my wife is having a pop-up store, and it's online. We don't even have the inventory. The person in Alabama has it. But she's got 70 people that are going to attend this event tonight. And because you can't buy it in stores, it makes it even cooler. But faster shopping, convenience, impacting the church. How do we maintain the message, meet the needs of the people, but do it faster? Because attention spans are getting less and less. Big tech for all, we've discussed a lot of this, but more than 2 out of 5 advanced internet users would like to get all of their products from the biggest 5 IT companies. I think we're starting to see that happen with Amazon doing what they've done and knowing that they're just starting to disrupt more and more markets. Of those, 3 and 4 believe this will happen only 5 years from now. So prediction is in 5 years, there'll be 5 major IT companies left. And we'll be dominating anywhere between 60 to 70% of retail spaces. Again, in Cincinnati here, I live on the east side, and what used to be a predominant mall here in town I was actually there this morning, is about half empty now. So, but talking about, things, churches buying these old malls, strip malls. There's this whole concept now of healthcare hubs buying malls, and that we could go to a healthcare mall to get everything we needed. So a percentage of consumers who are interested in the biggest 5 IT companies providing different services. You can see over there on the side, 51% talk about this internet and mobile broadband access, but if you look up there, 34% said they could move into the rented apartments and housing space, or 39% in hospitals and elderly care. So again, how do we keep tech in our mind as we move forward in the body? And then last is this whole wellness as a status symbol for all. This new brand, Après Sport, looking wellness ready. We believe that fitness doesn't have to be defined by performance. So and I don't know how this happens because I know how bad I sweat, but the whole concept is after you work out, you can just jump in your car and wear what you wore to work out in to work. So gym to the office type clothing. There's some of that around today, maybe not quite that dramatic, but still out there. Boutique health. Many consumers are increasingly interested in products that promote healthy sleep. So if you look over here on the right, you see this new bed over here. So if ever you get a chance, go to Sleep Number, and it's their new i10 model. But that bed is Bluetooth enabled. It measures your body temperature, so it fluctuates temperature. It has a heating mechanism in the feet. It has a massage mechanism. But most importantly, which is the reason why my wife has agreed to purchase this bed, is that it dictates when you snore, and it moves you up or down to get you in the most ideal sleeping position. My wife has become, I think I will probably be in a sandwich by the time I'm done, but we'll see here.
Yeah, if that doesn't work, I heard there's also a zap button.
Or the eject button to kick you right out of it. But you'll see it's got a whole app to it, so then it also dictates how you're sleeping and how your sleep impacts your daily life. I think we all know that. And then wellness leisure, again, we live in a golden age of the wellness vacation. So all these retreat centers, boot camps popping up. I do not find going to a P360 or an Orange Therapy boot camp as a vacation, but yet it's becoming more and more prevalent. And in this wellness space, Steve and I have worked a lot of years in this space. Now what's becoming, and this is where I think the church has a huge impact, is this whole concept of spirituality as a key mechanism to people's wellness. And how do we in the church play a part in that and impact consumers' lives from a wellness or well-being standpoint? So we just got through all of those. Oh, eat yourself better, obviously, eating habits. We just found for snacks, trying to find for kids sometimes for snacks is a real pain. But we just found this new company called Graze, Graze, and we get a box now every week delivered to the house of different types of healthy snacks. And they're already prepackaged. Anything from like like my daughter yesterday was eating a deconstructed carrot cake in this. So it was granola and carrots and honeycomb, but trying to promote healthier snacks for children and getting away from all the preservatives. So I'm going to stop there because we're at 10 till. There's some questions here for you you can think about after this. But would like to just open up first off, Tom, for any of you guys on here, any questions, anything? I saw some note taking happening that you'd like to ask us from the Nason group. We can talk about some, and then look at some of here. I will tell you some things that we did. I'm going to just run through. Let me get through this here a second. We actually come up with 4 questions that you can think about. But how might these trends impact my church if other churches were to leverage these trends? Implication of these consumer trends on consumers attending my church. What steps can I do to learn more about these trends? And as a leader, how might these trends impact my leadership style, and what can I do about it? So I'll open it up for some questions, and if not, we can, to finish a little bit early here, our comments.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, Shawn. As you think about the trends, and maybe even Steve and Mark could speak into this as you guys have kind of played in the space. Which one or two do you think will have the greatest impact on the church?
That's funny. So that was the activity that I just skipped. So you were right there. Mark, Steve, you wanna take a tag at answering for you guys? Like the one that you think could impact the church the most.
Mark, you want to go first? Which one do you think?
Yeah. Well, I wish I could narrow it down to one. So I'm going to narrow it down to 5. No, I'm kidding.
No.
I think the two, obviously, I'm going to go technology because I think it is the AI, even though that doesn't really sound like it's affecting us right now. I think artificial intelligence, even from just a humanistic standpoint of how we relate with technology, it is becoming so intertwined with who we are. It's actually beginning to shape how we think. So how do we communicate to an audience that is continually changing, and how it's beginning to shape even how we process information and how we relate to one another. For example, millennials, they don't have the facial expressions that people like myself, who's in my late 40s, I've got these nice wrinkles here, so that's one of those things that's changing. So I think the artificial intelligence, and I think social networking, those not just social silos, but how are we building relationships and communicating with people? So those are a couple that I think are going to affect the church, and even could affect somewhat church attendance, and how do we and how are they attending our church services, and how are they getting their information and communicating? Because I don't think they think anymore in terms of, I'm going to go to this one place and I'm going to get everything. In this culture that we have, they're picking and choosing quite a bit, and then they're making it work for them. So I'll be quiet. Those are a couple of things I'm chewing on right now.
Well,
Awesome.
Mark, to build on that, when you talk about personalizing it, I have a 20-year-old at university, and he has kind of curated his faith through apps, right? So he gets a daily Bible verse through email. He has other apps because he's going to a Jesuit university that will pull from that. So he's almost curated his experience because he's not at his home base. And what does that mean? And to go to the opposite, and again, I think there's great opportunity there. I just got a new phone, but I've had several apps that give you the quote of the day. In addition to Shawn, he's really good about that too. He's like our own personal app. If you go to the other end, so we're looking, and he's Generation Z, right? We had millennials and then Gen Z, and we don't have a name for the next generation. And then you go to the other end, which I think is really super important for the church, all churches, is aging, and how are we going to adapt to a much more active, a much more vocal, a much more wired group of people who have retired and have a great amount of energy and want to give back. I think from my experience in some environments, that's very threatening. In others, it's just an opportunity and a challenge to overcome. And so if you look at that spectrum, where does your church sit, and how do we engage in a way that that makes them feel welcome and leverages their talents and skills?
Awesome. Something else there, Tom?
Yeah. How do you help an organization that doesn't like innovation?
So what's really funny is I think one of the words I hate most in the world is innovation, because it's so not defined anymore. I think the option of organizations not liking innovation anymore is not even an option. So either as a leader, you've got to get in and innovate somehow, whatever that might look like. And again, we talk about innovation, and I didn't even get into all this. Innovation isn't necessarily the next big shiny object, but it can be taking something that is age old and tweaking it a little bit. I think just, again, you have to share this type of information with organizations and with leaders to say, here's what's happening. And then you start showing them. I mean, you know this, Tom, you and I've had some great conversations about how many churches are closing, Mark and I come from the assemblies. Steve is raised Catholic. It's something that every religion is, more doors are closing than opening. But yet here you are, Tom, in an organization that's trying to bring, multiplication to churches. That if we don't become aware of this, I had a conversation this morning, like how many of us ever thought that the automobile industry in the United States would have been as disruptive as it was 5 years ago, and almost completely collapsed. And that was honestly because they didn't innovate, and they just thought they could keep doing what they were doing. And then look, every day businesses closing because they think they're okay in the marketplace, and boom, they're gone.
Yeah.
And Shawn,
Go ahead.
could I add to that just for a second? I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she has a fair number of friends, and within her peer group, they spend time at each other's church just to go to a different experience. And as Shawn said, I was raised Catholic, and so was my daughter. And I would say it's always really interesting to hear Madison come back home and talk about the experience. And I think that's, what we're more about is when she goes to another church, she will come back and talk about that experience and what was unique or what really kind of captured her heart, so to speak. So when she went with a friend to an evangelical church, just the energy, you walk in the door and someone's there to greet you and welcome you. And if you've never been there before, which I've been to this church too, they will give you an overview of kind of how things work. And so, I agree with Shawn. In terms of innovation, that's not the best word, but I think each of us has had different experiences. So I belong because I moved to more than one church, and I've attended a number of friends' churches. And what ends up happening is you start looking at things that interest you beyond the word and that really pull you in, if that makes any sense at all as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember too, when I was at staff, and I did some writing on experiential storytelling back in the early part of the 2000s, and that was one of the conversations that we had. What happens if we don't begin to change and communicate and effectively change the way that we do church, and that we even look at church? Because the model that we currently have is about 500 years old. And we're still doing the same things over and over. So the methods, they can change. The message is, hopefully it's going to be consistent. But we've got to kind of take a look at that. And back then I remember saying what Shawn, you just said. I said, if we don't look at this, we're going to see that people aren't going to it won't be a slow death. What you'll see is you'll actually see some churches that all of a sudden, out of the blue, they're just gone. And that's crazy. But still.
Yep. Well, awesome.
Awesome. Well, Shawn, Steve, Mark, thank you for your time.